Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. We have a story today the likes of which I have never heard before.
Amazing!
It takes place very close to my backyard at the famous Multnomah Falls in Oregon. Also, we have a Philip K. Dick tale called Second Variety, and hard to believe, but Tom Williams is back with one more growing up special story from his friend Fred. Now, how shall we begin this?
Ron, we know that you're going to play a 5-minute mystery, so just bloody get to it.
Well, okay then.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Occam's Razor. This is a recurring theme in these tales, and sometimes I can be quite put out about it. What brings me back each week is they know that we know just how silly these are. But hey, let's get to it anyway.
Inspector Clark speaking. Yes? The Cooper Rubies? Where? Blackstone's at 49th. I'll be right over.
Oh, come in, Inspector. Oh, this is terrible, terrible. And to think that we took such precautions. I just can't understand it.
Now, just a moment, Mr. Blackstone. Just calm down a bit and tell me what's happened.
Tell you what's happened. One of the Cooper Rubies has been stolen. That's what's happened.
I understand that, Mr. Blackstone, but if I could have some information about them...
The Cooper Rubies are a group of 15 of the most exquisite stones I have ever had in my possession. This woman, Mrs. Lloyd, came into my shop and asked to see the Cooper Rubies.
I wanted to buy one, but I certainly don't now.
I was showing them to her myself. At the same time, I was showing this gentleman, Mr. Williams, some bracelets.
Just a simple little bracelet for my wife, Inspector.
I was interrupted by one of the sales girls. I turned away for just a moment, and when I looked back, one of the rubies was gone. Now I ask you, who other than one of these two could have taken it?
Your assumption is quite sound, Mr. Blackstone. I'm very much afraid I'm going to have to ask you two to be searched.
Why, of all the
Leave your bag here on the desk. Mr. Blackstone's secretary will assist you in the other room. Mr. Williams, I'll search you in Mr. Blackstone's office. Let's see. Mrs. Lloyd's bag. Compact. Nothing here. Lipstick. No secret compartments.
I hope you're satisfied.
Gloves. Nothing in the pockets. Well, I guess that eliminates you, Mrs. Lloyd. Now, Mr. Williams' things. Nothing in the pockets. Billfold. Comb.
Does that eliminate me, Inspector?
I guess it does, Mr. Williams. Everything seems to be quite in order. Cigarette, Mrs. Lloyd?
No, thank you. I don't smoke.
Williams?
No, thanks. I have my pipe.
Oh, of course. Well, Mr. Blackstone, I've found your precious ruby.
You've what? But I haven't seen it.
No, you haven't seen it, Mr. Blackstone, but I know where it is. Mr. Williams, I arrest you for the theft of the Cooper ruby. How did the inspector discover Eric Williams' theft of the Cooper rubies? Do you know the clue? In a moment, we'll hear more. But first...
Okay, do you know where the ruby is? I do, but I have a slight advantage. I've already heard the ending. If you had to guess, what do you think is the correct answer? I will say that it's not just a lot of smoke and mirrors. Also, I'll point out that the actors did a wonderful job of, well, acting. Now, let's go to listen to the solution.
And now, let's see what Inspector Clark has to say.
But I don't understand. Where is the ruby, Inspector?
Well, Mr. Blackstone, when I asked these two people to submit to be searched, I knew the guilty one would hold out. For a moment, I thought I was licked. We seemed to have all their possessions, yet nothing was evident. Only when I offered Mr. Williams a cigarette did I notice that he was smoking a pipe. Here, Mr. Blackstone, is your ruby, concealed in the bowl of this pipe. And now, Mr. Williams, I'd like to show you something in bracelets. A double one, better known as the handcuff.
It was in the pipe. Had I written this one, I might have given a different clue. But at least he did go through everything he checked, and the pipe was the only remaining item. So Occam's razor applies to this one. This FFM was brought to you by, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. A few months ago, I asked for your armed forces stories, and you came through big time. We aired these on episode 344, It's Our Military. Then I asked for your scary stories for the 2018 month of Spooky. You answered the call so well on that one that we had to extend the month by 1 week to read them all. At Christmas time, I asked for more, and you gave us more for episode number 361, Christmas Spirits. Now I'm back again with another request. I want to do a UFO-based show completely using only your stories. I'm planning on bringing in an expert to talk about each one. Now, I'm not sure who that's going to be just yet, but before I figure that out, I would like to collect a few stories. So please, if you have a UFO, orb, or alien encounter story, please get them to me. You can contact me through the website or use the story submission page at ronsamazingstories.com. I think that this will be a very good podcast, and I'm really excited about it. Thank you in advance. Ron's Amazing Stories is looking to add sponsors to the show. I know that many of you don't want this, but I've always made you this promise. It will always be good stuff, things I believe in and have checked out. Gladys Goodies are the first of these, and that has gone pretty well. If you have something that you want to sell or promote on Ron's Amazing Stories, please contact us at ronsamazingstories@gmail.com and tell us about it. All submissions will be considered. And now, a word from our current sponsor, Gladys Goodies.
Hi everyone, I am Jason Dowd, president of Gladys Goodies, and Gladys is my dachshund, and I am excited to tell you that if you go to our website, GladysGoodies.com, and use the promo code RONS, that's RONS, you will get 25% off your entire order. These treats are all natural with low fat, no artificial flavors, chemicals, byproducts, preservatives, sodium, or anything else that will harm your fur friend. We take great pride in our products, and you will see it once you try some. So go to GladysGoodies.com, that's GladysGoodies.com, and don't forget to use the promo code RON to get that discount. And while you're there, pick your doggy up some swag too. You'll be glad you did, and thanks for listening to this amazing podcast of Ron's Amazing Stories.
Thank you, Gladys.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
This story comes from Henry Cooper of Portland, Oregon. Two things that Portland is known for is being weird and amazing hiking trails. I think that after you hear Henry's story, you will agree at least what happened to Henry was very weird. By the way, anyone from the Portland area has no problem with being called weird. It's actually a trademark for the city. Henry is a hiking guide working for a company based in Portland and has been a native Oregonian his entire life. He sent this in via ronsamazingstories.com using the submission page. I edited this one and received Henry's blessing. Here is his story called The Creature at Multnomah Falls. I work in the outdoor field and lead trips regularly. I once led a trip to the top of Multnomah Falls. It's a tough climb and about 6 miles if you take the full loop. I was leading a group of 8 middle school kids and their instructor. The plan was to camp out at the top, and we had the proper permits to do this. It was a beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and their teacher had gone to bed in their tents. I had chosen to spend the night in a hammock hung between 2 trees. I was really into a book I was reading, so I stayed awake until after midnight. I finally turned off my headlamp to settle in for the night. Everything around me was rather bright from the moon, and from the position I was in, I could see down the trail we had hiked up to get to the top. I laid there, enjoying the scenery, and then noticed something moving up the trail. Coyotes and deer are common in the area, so I perked up. As it got closer, I could tell it was a person. We were in the middle of nowhere, and here was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp or any gear. I was just frozen watching this person move closer to our camp. It arrived at the top of the hill and then just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man survey our camp. At first, I thought maybe this was a park ranger come to check us, but in truth, all I could really see was the outline of him. He just stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes, but was probably more like 10. He then turned, sat down under a tree facing our camp. He was sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there, staring. I had no idea what to do, so I decided to wait it out. I waited, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 a.m. Then he stood up and let out a horrible scream, which was loud enough to wake the dead. I took a moment to survey the camp. I knew that the kids and the teacher would come running out of their tents any second. I jumped to my feet and yelled at the dark stranger. "Hey you!" Expletive. "Get the heck out of here!" The creature turned towards me and bellowed out another scream. Our eyes locked. His were not human. They seemed to look right through me into my very soul. By now, the kids were coming out of their tent. I guess my protective nature came to the front, and I ran at the man-thing, screaming out my own version of a death cry. Then he just leaped into the sky and was gone. I looked for the beast, but never saw it again. No one slept that night. I told the teacher what I saw, but we decided to tell the kids that a bear had wandered into the camp. The rest of the trip went as planned, and the kids had a story about their crazy guide who had scared away a bear. To this day, I have no idea what I saw, but it surely did freak me out. Oh, and I was paranoid that we were being followed for the rest of that trip. Henry Cooper, Portland, Oregon. Wow, Henry, that is crazy indeed. I don't think I've ever heard a story quite like it before, and I've heard a bunch. Could it have been a demon of sort, or maybe some other kind of monster? I don't know, but it sure does make for a chilling story. Thank you, Henry, for sharing this one with us. Do you have a story? Please tell it to us. We want to hear it, and you want to tell it. Head to ronsamazingstories.com, click on the story submission banner, and just type it out, or just leave your information and I'll contact you and we can talk. We want to hear your story. Do it today. We have been blessed with one more growing up from Tom Williams. I, for one, am happy that we have this tale and hope we still get these from time to time. No promises, but we can hope. Growing up. We've all had to do it, or at least are trying to work on it. Some of us may never really accomplish it, and for others it is faded away too soon. Tom Williams, well, he's a lucky man. He lives in Berlin, Germany, was raised in Alabama, and sends in these tales from his youth. On growing up this time, Tom's friend Fred has this tale from his first day in school.
Do you remember your first day of school? Fred certainly did, and he wrote me about it. First day, first grade. The year was 1948, and I was living with my grandmother in a large wood frame house in a small rural town in southern Alabama called Whistler. This late summer day started out as usual, washing my face, combing my hair, and a piece of jelly bread for breakfast. I was fresh scrubbed today, as I had had my weekly bath the night before in preparation for my first day of school. My weekly bath was taken in a large metal wash tub set on top of the kitchen counter. Water was heated up in a kitchen wood stove and poured in. For this special day, I put on my best shirt, the one my grandmother had made for me from a flour sack with pretty print on it, a good pair of pants, no holes, and a new pair of shoes, bought special for the occasion, no socks. They were a waste of money. I always went barefooted and could hardly walk in the new shoes. I knew I was going to have a hard time walking the mile to school in those things. As soon as I got out of sight of the house, I took them off and stashed them under an azalea bush until I returned home. This past summer, I had been shown the way to the school several times, so no one would have to go with me. I could walk it by myself. I left early, got to school on time, and was shown to the classroom I was assigned to. I took the desk up front, sitting there quietly wondering what went on in a school, what glorious things were about to be revealed, and wishing I was back home chasing the chickens around the backyard for fun. The teacher introduced herself and went around to each desk, handing out a page from a coloring book and a few crayons. I had never seen coloring book before, nor crayons, and I had no idea what to do with them. I looked around the room and saw the other students, crayons in hand, going back and forth on the paper, only to find out later that you were supposed to stay within the lines of the picture. I was scribbling all over the paper. After a while, the teacher came around, up and down the aisle, looking at each child's colored picture and said words like, "Good," "Yes," "Pretty," "Okay," until she got to mine. She kept staring back and forth from the picture to me, and finally just shook her head and moved on. No words for me. After a couple of hours, everyone was told to go and get their lunch. All had brought one, except me, and they were placed on a large wooden table at the back of the room. I thought that the school had provided the lunches all in a brown paper bag. So I went back, picked one up, took it to my desk, and started eating it. The sandwich was delicious. Cut-up wieners with ketchup on bread. I had never had a wiener before, never even seen one, and it was very good. I was enjoying this new treat when out of the back of the class I heard a kid's voice yell out, "Hey, somebody stole my lunch." Then it began to dawn on me that I had made a mistake. The school didn't provide the lunches, and I was eating his. I looked at the bag, and it had a word on it, his name, but I couldn't read. Then the teacher took the little red-haired boy by the hand and says, "We'll find it." She began leading him up and down the rows of desks, starting on the other side of the room, reading the names on the bags. Something told me I needed to get rid of the evidence, so I started eating faster and had almost finished the sandwich when she got to me. "Here it is," she said in a loud voice. Every child's eyes were on me. "Do you want the rest?" "No," she said, tears streaming down his freckled face. She took what was left, maybe a bite, put it in the bag and threw it into the trash can. She turned and pointed her finger at me and said, "I've got my eye on you." I shrunk down and tried to hide in the desk. I was very glad when the school bell rang and we were dismissed. After that day, I didn't see the little red-haired boy again until the following school year. There he was on the first day, lined up with the other first graders, a head taller than the rest, waiting to be shown his classroom. I noticed he was clutching his lunch bag tightly to his chest. I later learned that he had refused to come back to school after his horrible start a year ago. I guess he figured, if this is how school is going to be, I want no part of it. Now he was ready to try it again. I think the teacher blamed me for his dropping out. At least she acted like it. I would often notice her staring at me and shaking her head. Now, so many years later, I still feel badly about costing that boy a year of his academic life, all because I ate his sandwich on his first day of school. Fred. Very interesting. But I've often wondered, and I have to ask Fred, were his shoes under that azalea bush when he left school that day? Sincerely, Tom.
Thank you, Tom, for another great tale. I personally don't remember my first day in school because I had to go to daycare and then preschool. My mom was a single parent at the time and had to find work. So my first day of school kinda all rolled together. I do know this. I didn't care for daycare very much. While I don't remember this story, I was told that I was the mastermind behind the Great Escape from the Daycare Center of 1965. I didn't get very far, though. I was found hanging upside down on the chain-link fence that surrounded the school. Apparently, my plan was not that great, and I ruined a perfectly good pair of jeans. Thank you, Tom, for reading our story today, and thank you, Fred, for sharing your first day in school. This time, we have a classic science fiction tale written by one of its more prolific authors, Philip K. Dick. This is the longest of 4 parts, and like Philip's other stories, it takes us to a time in the future when the world is not a happy place. The story is called Second Variety and was suggested to me by a listener a few months ago. Unfortunately, I lost the original email from him, and I don't remember the name. Please accept my apologies for this and send me a note so that I can give you your proper credit. Second Variety was first published in Space Science Fiction in the May edition of 1953 and is read for us quite expertly by Phil Chenevert. Take it away, Phil.
Section 1 of Second Variety. The Russian soldier made his way nervously up the ragged side of the hill, holding his gun ready. He glanced around him, licking his dry lips, his face set. From time to time he reached up a gloved hand and wiped perspiration from his neck, pushing down his coat collar. Eric turned to Corporal Leon. "Want him, or can I have him?" He adjusted the view sight so the Russian's features squarely filled the glass, the lines cutting across his hard, somber features. Leon considered. The Russian was close, moving rapidly, almost running. "Don't fire. Wait." Leon tensed. "I don't think we're needed." The Russian increased his pace, kicking ash and piles of debris out of his way. He reached the top of the hill and stopped, panting, staring around him. The sky was overcast, drifting clouds of gray particles. Bare trunks of trees jutted up occasionally. The ground was level and bare, rubble-strewn, with the ruins of buildings standing out here and there like yellowing skulls. The Russian was uneasy. He knew something was wrong. He started down the hill. Now he was only a few paces from the bunker. Eric was getting fidgety. He played with his pistol, glancing at Leon. "Don't worry," Leon said. "He won't get here. They'll take care of him." "Are you sure? He's got damn far." "They hang around close to the bunker. He's getting into the bad part. Get set." The Russian began to hurry, sliding down the hill, his boots sinking into the heaps of gray ash, trying to keep his gun up. He stopped for a moment, lifting his field glasses to his face. "He's looking right at us," Eric said. The Russian came on. They could see his eyes, like two blue stones. His mouth was open a little. He needed a shave. His chin was stubbled. On one bony cheek was a square of tape, showing blue at the edge. A fungoid spot. His coat was muddy and torn. One glove was missing. As he ran, his belt counter bounced up and down against him. Leon touched Eric's arm. "Here one comes." Across the ground something small and metallic came, flashing in the dull sunlight of midday. A metal sphere. It raced up the hill after the Russian, its treads flying. It was small, one of the baby ones. Its claws were out, two razor projections spinning in a blur of white steel. The Russian heard it. He turned instantly, firing. The sphere dissolved into particles, but already a second had emerged and was following the first. The Russian fired again. A third sphere leaped up the Russian's leg, clicking and whirring. It jumped to the shoulder. The spinning blades disappeared into the Russian's throat. Eric relaxed. "Well, that's that. God, those damn things give me the creeps. Sometimes I think we were better off before." "If we hadn't invented them, they would have." Leon lit a cigarette shakily. "I wonder why a Russian would come all this way alone. I didn't see anyone covering him." Lieutenant Scott came slipping up the tunnel into the bunker. "What happened? Something entered the screen." "And Ivan." "Just one?" Eric brought the view screen around. Scott peered into it. Now there were numerous metal spheres crawling over the prostrate body, dull metal globes clicking and whirring, sawing up the Russian into small parts to be carried away. "What a lot of claws," Scott murmured. "They come like flies. Not much game for them anymore." Scott pushed the sight away, disgusted. Like flies. I wonder why he was out there. They know we have claws all around. A larger robot had joined the smaller spheres. It was directing operations. A long, blunt tube with projecting eyepieces. There was not much left of the soldier. What remained was being brought down the hillside by the host of claws. "Sir," Leon said. "If it's all right, I'd like to go out there and take a look at him." "Why?" "Maybe he came with something." Scott considered. He shrugged. "All right, but be careful." "I have my tab." Leon patted the metal band at his wrist. "I'll be out of bounds." He picked up his rifle and stepped carefully up to the mouth of the bunker, making his way between blocks of concrete and steel prongs, twisted and bent. The air was cold at the top. He crossed over the ground toward the remains of the soldier, striding across the soft ash. A wind blew around him, swirling gray particles up to his face. He squinted and pushed on. The claws retreated as he came close, some of them stiffening into immobility. He touched his tab. The Ivan would have given something for that. Short, hard radiation emitted from the tab neutralized the claws, put them out of commission. Even the big robot with its 2 waving eye stalks retreated respectfully as he approached. He bent down over the remains of the soldier. The gloved hand was closed tightly. There was something in it. Leon pried the fingers apart. A sealed container, aluminum, still shiny. He put it in his pocket and made his way back to the bunker. Behind him the claws came back to life, moving into operation again. The procession resumed, metal spheres moving through the gray ash with their loads. He could hear their treads scrabbling against the ground. He shuddered. Scott watched intently as he brought the shiny tube out of his pocket. He had that? In his hand. Leon unscrewed the top. "Maybe you should look at it, sir." Scott took it. He emptied the contents out in the palm of his hand, a small piece of silk paper carefully folded. He sat down by the light and unfolded it. "What's it say, sir?" Eric said. Several officers came up the tunnel. Major Hendricks appeared. "Major," Scott said, "look at this." Hendricks read the slip. "This just come?" "A single runner, just now." "Where is he?" Hendricks asked sharply. "The claws got him." Major Hendricks grunted. "Here." He passed it to his companions. "I think this is what we've been waiting for. They certainly took their time about it." "So they want to talk terms," Scott said. "Are we going along with them?" "That's not for us to decide." Hendricks sat down. "Where's the communications officer? I want the moon base." Leon pondered as the communications officer raised the outside antenna cautiously, scanning the sky above the bunker for any sign of a watching Russian ship. "Sir," Scott said to Hendricks, "it's sure strange they suddenly came around. We've been using the claws for almost a year. Now all of a sudden they start to fold." "Maybe claws have been getting down in their bunkers. One of the big ones, the kind with stalks, got into an Ivan bunker last week," Eric said. "It got a whole platoon of them before they got their lids shut." "How do you know?" "A buddy told me. The thing came back with remains." "Moonbase, sir," the communications officer said. On the screen, the face of the lunar monitor appeared. His crisp uniform contrasted to the uniforms in the bunker, and he was clean-shaven. "Moonbase. This is Forward Command L. Whistle, on Terra. Let me have General Thompson." The monitor faded. Presently, General Thompson's heavy features came into focus. "What is it, Major?" "Our claws got a single Russian runner with a message. We don't know whether to act on it. There have been tricks like this in the past." "What's the message?" "The Russians want us to send a single officer on policy level over to their lines. For a conference. They don't state the nature of the conference. They say that matters of—" He consulted the slip. "Matters of grave urgency make it advisable that discussion be opened between a representative of the UN forces and themselves." He held the message up to the screen for the general to scan. Thompson's eyes moved. "What should we do?" Hendricks said. "Send a man out." "You don't think it's a trap?" "It might be. But the location they give for their forward command is correct. It's worth a try at any rate. I'll send an officer out and report the results to you as soon as he returns." "All right, Major." Thompson broke the connection. The screen died. Up above, the antenna came slowly down. Hendricks rolled up the paper, deep in thought. "I'll go," Leone said. "They want somebody at policy level." Hendricks rubbed his jaw. "Policy level. I haven't been outside in months. Maybe I could use a little air. Don't you think it's risky?" Hendricks lifted the view sight and gazed into it. The remains of the Russian were gone. Only a single claw was in sight. It was folding itself back, disappearing into the ash like a crab. Like some hideous metal crab. "That's the only thing that bothers me." Hendricks rubbed his wrist. "I know I'm safe as long as I have this on me, but there's something about them. I hate the damn things. I wish we'd never invented them. There's something wrong with them. Relentless little... If we hadn't invented them, the Ivans would have." Hendricks pushed the sight back. "Anyhow, it seems to be winning the war. I guess that's good." "Sounds like you're getting the same jitters as the Ivans." Hendricks examined his wristwatch. "I guess I had better get started, if I want to be there before dark." He took a deep breath and then stepped out onto the gray, rubbed ground. After a minute, he lit a cigarette and stood gazing around him. The landscape was dead. Nothing stirred. He could see for miles endless ash and slag, ruins of buildings. A few trees without leaves or branches, only the trunks. Above him, the eternal rolling clouds of gray drifting between Terra and the sun. Major Hendricks went on. Off to the right, something scuttled, something round and metallic. A claw going lickety-split after something. Probably after a small animal, a rat. They got rats, too, as a sort of sideline. He came to the top of the little hill and lifted his field glasses. The Russian lines were a few miles ahead of him. They had a forward command post there. The runner had come from it. A squat robot with undulating arms passed by him, its arms weaving inquiringly. The robot went on its way, disappearing under some debris. Hendricks watched it go. He had never seen that type before. There were getting to be more and more types he had never seen, new varieties and sizes coming up from the underground factories. Hendricks put out his cigarette and hurried on. It was interesting, the use of artificial forms in warfare. How had they got started? Necessity? The Soviet Union had gained great initial success, usual with the side that got the war going. Most of North America had been blasted off the map. Retaliation was quick in coming, of course. The sky was full of circling disc bombers long before the war began. They had been up there for years. The discs began sailing down all over Russia within hours after Washington got it. But that hadn't helped Washington. The American bloc governments moved to the moon base the first year. There was not much else to do. Europe was gone. A slag heap with dark weeds growing from the ashes and bones. Most of North America was useless. Nothing could be planted. No one could live. A few million people kept going up in Canada and down in South America. But during the second year, Soviet parachutists began to drop. A few at first, then more and more. They wore the first really effective anti-radiation equipment. What was left of American production moved to the moon along with the governments. All but the troops. The remaining troops stayed behind as best they could, a few thousand here, a platoon there. No one knew exactly where they were. They stayed where they could, moving around at night, hiding in ruins, in sewers, cellars with the rats and snakes. It looked as if the Soviet Union had the war almost won. Except for a handful of projectiles fired off from the moon daily, there was almost no weapon in use against them. They came and went as they pleased. The war, for all practical purposes, was over. Nothing effective opposed them. And then the first claws appeared, and overnight the complexion of the war changed. The claws were awkward at first, slow. The Ivans knocked them off almost as fast as they crawled out of their underground tunnels. But then they got better, faster, and more cunning. Factories all on Terra turned them out. Factories a long way underground, behind the Soviet lines, factories that had once made atomic projectiles, now almost forgotten. The claws got faster, and they got bigger. New types appeared, some with feelers, some that flew. There were a few jumping kinds. The best technicians on the moon were working on designs, making them more and more intricate, more flexible. They became uncanny. The Ivans were having a lot of trouble with them. Some of the little claws were learning to hide themselves, burrowing down into the ash, lying in wait. And then they started getting into the Russian bunkers, slipping down when the lids were raised for air and a look around. One claw inside a bunker, a churning sphere of blades and metal, that was enough. And when one got in, others followed. With a weapon like that, the war couldn't go on much longer. Maybe it was already over. Maybe he was going to hear the news. Maybe the Politburo had decided to throw in the sponge. Too bad it had taken so long. 6 years. A long time for war like that, the way they had waged it. The automatic retaliation discs spinning down all over Russia, hundreds of thousands of them, bacteria crystals, the Soviet-guided missiles whistling through the air, the chain bombs, and now this, the robots, the claws. The claws weren't like other weapons. They were alive from any practical standpoint, whether the governments wanted to admit it or not. They were not machines. They were living things, spinning, creeping, shaking themselves up suddenly from the gray ash and darting toward a man, climbing up him, rushing for his throat. And that was what they had been designed to do. Their job. They did their job well, especially lately with the new designs coming up. Now they repaired themselves. They were on their own. Radiation tabs protected the UN troops, but if a man lost his tab, he was fair game for the claws, no matter what his uniform. Down below the surface, automatic machinery stamped them out. Human beings stayed a long way off. It was too risky. Nobody wanted to be around them. They were left to themselves, and they seemed to be doing all right. The new designs were faster, more complex, more efficient. Apparently, they had won the war. Major Hendricks lit a second cigarette. The landscape depressed him. Nothing but ash and ruins. He seemed to be alone, the only living thing in the whole world. To the right, the ruins of a town rose up, a few walls and heaps of debris. He tossed the dead match away, increasing his pace. Suddenly he stopped, jerking up his gun, his body tense. For a minute it looked like... From behind the shell of a ruined building, a figure came, walking slowly toward him, walking hesitantly. Hendricks blinked. "Stop." The boy stopped. Hendricks lowered the gun. The boy stood silently, looking at him. He was small, not very old, perhaps 8. But it was hard to tell. Most of the kids who remained were stunted. He wore a faded blue sweater, ragged with dirt, and short pants. His hair was long and matted. Brown hair. It hung over his face and around his ears. He held something in his arms. "What's that you have?" Hendricks said sharply. The boy held it out. It was a toy, a bear, a teddy bear. The boy's eyes were large, but without expression. Hendricks relaxed. "I don't want it. Keep it." The boy hugged the bear again. "Where do you live?" Hendricks said. "In there." "The ruins?" Yes. Underground? Yes. How many are there? How many? How many of you? How big's your settlement? The boy did not answer. Hendricks frowned. You're not all by yourself, are you? The boy nodded. How do you stay alive? There's food. What kind of food? Different. Hendricks studied him. How old are you? 13. It wasn't possible. Or was it? The boy was thin, stunted, and probably sterile. Radiation exposure years straight. No wonder he was so small. His arms and legs were like pipe cleaners, knobby and thin. Hendricks touched the boy's arm. His skin was dry and rough, radiation skin. He bent down, looking into the boy's face. There was no expression. Big eyes, big and dark. Are you blind? Hendricks said. No, I can see some. How did you get away from the claws? The claws? The round things that run and burrow. I don't understand. Maybe there weren't any claws around. A lot of areas were free. They collected mostly around bunkers where there were people. The claws had been designed to sense warmth of living things. You're lucky. Hendricks straightened up. Well, which way are you going? Back there? Can I come with you? With me? Hendricks folded his arms. I'm going a long way. Miles. I have to hurry. He looked at his watch. I have to get there by nightfall. I want to come. Hendricks fumbled in his pack. It isn't worth it. Here. He tossed down the food cans he had with him. You take these and go back, okay? The boy said nothing. I'll be coming back this way in a day or so. If you're around here when I come back, you can come along with me, all right? I want to go with you now. It's a long walk. I can walk. Hendricks shifted uneasily. It made too good a target, two people walking along, and the boy would slow him down. But he might not come back this way, and if the boy were really all alone... Okay, come along. The boy fell in beside him. Hendricks strode along. The boy walked silently, clutching his teddy bear. What's your name? Hendricks said after a time. David Edward Daring. David? What happened to your mother and father? They died. How? In the blast. How long ago? 6 years. Hendricks slowed down. You've been alone 6 years? No. There were other people for a while. They went away. And you've been alone since? Yes. Hendricks glanced down. The boy was strange, saying very little, withdrawn. But that was the way they were, the children who had survived. Quiet, stoic. A strange kind of fatalism gripped them. Nothing came as a surprise. They accepted anything that came along. There was no longer any normal, any natural course of things, moral or physical, for them to expect. Custom, habit, all the determining forces of learning were gone. Only brute experience remained. Am I walking too fast? Hendricks said. No. How did you happen to see me? I was waiting. Waiting? Hendricks was puzzled. What were you waiting for? To catch things. What kind of things? Things to eat. Oh. Hendricks set his lips grimly. A 13-year-old boy living on rats and gophers and half-rotten canned food, down in a hole under the ruins of a town, with radiation pools and claws and Russian dive mines up above, coasting around in the sky. Where are we going? David asked. To the Russian lines. Russian? The enemy, the people who started the war. They dropped the first radiation bombs. They began all this. The boy nodded. His face showed no expression. I'm an American, Hendricks said. There was no comment. On they went, the two of them, Hendricks walking a little ahead, David trailing behind him, hugging his dirty teddy bear against his chest. About 4 p.m, they stopped to eat. Hendricks built a fire in a hollow between some slabs of concrete. He cleared the weeds away and heaped up bits of wood. The Russians' lines were not very far ahead. Around him was what had once been a long valley, acres of fruit trees and grapes. Nothing remained now but a few bleak stumps and the mountains that stretched across the horizon at the far end. And the clouds of rolling ash that blew and drifted with the wind, settling over the weeds and remains of buildings, walls here and there, once in a while what had been a road. Hendricks made coffee and heated up some boiled mutton and bread. Here, he handed bread and mutton to David. David squatted by the edge of the fire, his knees knobby and white. He examined the food and then passed it back, shaking his head. No. No? Don't you want any? No. Hendricks shrugged. Maybe the boy was a mutant, used to special food. It didn't matter. When he was hungry, he would find something to eat. The boy was strange, but there were many strange changes coming over the world. Life was not the same anymore. It would never be the same again. The human race was going to have to realize that. Suit yourself, Hendricks said. He ate the bread and mutton by himself, washing it down with coffee. He ate slowly, finding the food hard to digest. When he was done, he got to his feet and stamped the fire out. David rose slowly, watching him with his young, old eyes. "We're going," Hendricks said. "All right." Hendricks walked along, his gun in his arms. They were close. He was tense, ready for anything. The Russians should be expecting a runner, an answer to their own runner, but they were tricky. There was always the possibility of a slip-up. He scanned the landscape around him. Nothing but slag and ash, a few hills, charred trees, concrete walls. But some place ahead was the first bunker of the Russian lines, the forward command. Underground, buried deep with only a periscope showing, a few gun muzzles, maybe an antenna. "Will we be there soon?" David asked. "Yes. Getting tired?" "No." "Why then?" David did not answer. He plodded carefully along behind, picking his way over the ash. His legs and shoes were gray with dust. His pinched face was streaked, lines of gray ash and rivulets down the pale white of his skin. There was no color to his face, typical of the new children growing up in cellars and sewers and underground shelters. Hendricks slowed down. He lifted his field glasses and studied the ground ahead of him. Were they there, someplace, waiting for him, watching him, the way his men had watched the Russian runner? A chill went up his back. Maybe they were getting their guns ready, preparing to fire, the way his men had prepared, made ready to kill. Hendricks stopped, wiping perspiration from his face. Damn, it made him uneasy. But he should be expected. The situation was different. He strode over the ash, holding his gun tightly with both hands. Behind him came David. Hendricks peered around, tight-lipped. Any second it might happen. A burst of white light, a blast, carefully aimed from inside a deep concrete bunker. He raised his arm and waved it around in a circle. Nothing moved. To the right, a long ridge ran, topped with dead tree trunks. A few wild vines had grown up around the trees, remains of arbors, and the eternal dark weeds. Hendricks studied the ridge. Was anything up there? Perfect place for a lookout. He approached the ridge warily, David coming silently behind. If it were his command, he'd have a sentry up there, watching for troops trying to infiltrate into the command area. Of course, if it were his command, there would be the claws around the area for full protection. He stopped, feet apart, hands on his hips. "Are we there?" David said. "Almost." "Why have we stopped?" "I don't want to take any chances." Hendricks advanced slowly. Now the ridge lay directly beside him, along his right, overlooking him. His uneasy feeling increased. If an Ivan were up there, he wouldn't have a chance. He waved his arm again. They should be expecting someone in the UN uniform in response to the note capsule, unless the whole thing was a trap. Keep up with me. He turned toward David. Don't drop behind. With you? Up beside me. We're close. We can't take any chances. Come on. I'll be all right. David remained behind him, in the rear, a few paces away, still clutching his teddy bear. Have it your way. Hendricks raised his glasses again, suddenly tense. For a moment, had something moved? He scanned the ridge carefully. Everything was silent, dead. No life up there, only tree trunks and ash. Maybe a few rats. The big black rats that had survived the claws. Mutants built their own shelters out of saliva and ash, some kind of plaster. Adaptation. He started forward again. End of section 1.
Now that was part 1 of the story, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Next week, we will have part 2. If you want to know more about the author Philip K. Dick, I will have links to the spotlight I wrote about him in the show notes. Please give me feedback about this story. I really want to know what you think. Also, if you were the person that suggested this one to me, please send me an email. I really want you to have the credit. Well, that is the show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank Henry Cooper, Tom Williams, and his friend Fred for contributing to the show this time. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find all the links you'll need. We are on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many other services. Please pick one and do leave reviews and feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.